Azure AD Identity Protection and Azure ATP. And my name is Dana Kaufman, and I'm a program manager in the Identity Security Investigations team, specifically Identity Security and Protection Group. I have a team that looks at protection systems for identity across the consumer accounts, identity systems, Microsoft account, and the enterprise identity systems, Azure AD. And we own the protection system that customers use called Azure AD Identity Protection.
Hey, Dana, and nice to meet you. My name is Eyal Manor, and I'm coming from the Advanced Threat Analytics group. And this group is actually building for you the product called Azure ATP, also building the ATA, Advanced Threat Analytics solution, that is going to protect us from advanced threats, from compromised identities. And together today, Dana and myself from Azure AD and Azure ATP, going to show you how we're protecting ourselves in the hybrid environment. And actually for that, it's very important for me to start analyzing a real case of one of our customers that got breached recently, and our incident response team have helped them to understand what happened, why it happened, what was the damage, and get back on the fit. And it's super interesting from my perspective, not only because those organization was breached and attacked for more than 8 months, the attacker were dominant there in stealing a lot of sensitive data. But what more interesting for me to analyze that in this specific session for you is that we can see that the attackers were working on several dimensions from the customer perspective, cloud and on-premises. So let's make a small deep dive in that and understand what our incident response people have analyzed for this organization. Day one. What we're seeing in day one is that somebody has compromised a non-MFA enabled account in the cloud. Now, our statistics tell us that the chances for you to compromise the non-MFA account is 1%. 1% sounds low, but if I have 100 accounts, it means that I'm in. So the attackers got in. And when they got in, they started to look at the emails. They've created some forwarding rules to the emails into their bad mailbox to get all of the emails transparently, so they don't even need to re-log in every time. They just sit there, and mails are landing in the bad people mailbox items. They were looking at the SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business and other cloud services. And as we can see here, for more than 8 months, these bad guys had the ability to control this identity and look for the cloud resources that they're using. But on day number 16, get that, only 2 weeks after they got into this business, they just got another super interesting thing. Since they get the email, they also have the ability to find the email from the IT admin that, guess what, is telling me how to connect to VPN to the business, how I can configure VPN, what are my VPN settings. So already on day 16, they made a jump from the on-prem environment, also from the cloud environment, also to the on-prem environment, and now they are running on both dimensions. When they're on-prem, they can get access to the crown jewels. They get the sensitive data. They get all of the devices and all of the servers that are running on-prem from which they can actually move laterally, and this is what happened. They were using these non-sensitive account privileges on one computer where this user had an admin access in order to start stealing credentials of other users who were signed into this computer and move laterally within the network. Over a period of more than 8 months, they were there. Nobody has seen them, only in the cloud and not in the on-prem, and they were stealing sensitive data. So Dana, I'm going back to point number 1 where this password spray attack happened. Is this happened a lot or just, I don't know, bad luck?
Unfortunately, it's not all that uncommon for identity attacks. In the last year, we've seen a 300% increase in attacks on identity systems. Some of the things that keep us up at night are phishing attacks. In March, we had 23 million high-risk sign-ins on the enterprise side. A lot of those correlated with phishing. We saw password spray, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail about in a minute, about 350,000 accounts that were compromised in April from password spray. And then for breach replay, where you breach a third-party system and then play it against another identity system to try to get in, we saw about 4.6 billion attempted authentications with breach credentials in May. So unfortunately, it's not uncommon. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but this is an actual password spray attack. So what is a password spray attack? The bad guys have these lists of usernames They also have passwords. You know they get them from breach lists. But they don't really care about the passwords once they've tried them. So the bad guys have these like data intelligence. They have this BI system of usernames. And they go and they pick companies. And then they try the most common passwords they can think of. And so in this case, they use your password policy against you and human tendencies. So they know that most customers have password policies with one uppercase. You require a numeric and a special character. And you require your users to change their passwords every 90 days. So what do you think they're using right now? I guarantee we're seeing fall 2018 bang played against us, right? And like when I'm talking to customers in DC, I say I guarantee that they're gonna have success with Redskins 2018 bang, right? Like attackers know human behavior. What's interesting about this chart is each of these colors is a unique password. You don't normally see clusters like that. Normally you'll see colors spread apart as your users enter different passwords. So seeing these clusters of passwords really represents what a password spray attack is. Now we know that they're successful based on data analysis 1%. So I'm gonna do a little math for you. So bad guy has 200 of your accounts. He doesn't care about your passwords. He runs a password spray attack at you. He gets 1%, so he gets 2 accounts in your system. All he needs is 1, because then he or she turns around and downloads your address book. Now he has 20,000 accounts, and he tries the password spray again. Now he's into 200 of your accounts. So password spray is a real thing, and they can go low and slow. It's across multiple accounts, so lockout doesn't impact it. So what can we do? We're in this world of zero trust networks where we have users and devices going against cloud apps and on-prem apps. What can we do to protect ourselves? Well, we need detection and protection systems across our identity systems, our endpoints, our user data, our cloud applications, and infrastructure. You basically need a layered security approach. Microsoft Threat Protection provides that. It also aggregates the intelligence from all of those places and all those security products, Satya mentioned it yesterday, into the intelligent security graph. So we have about 6.5 trillion signals that come together every day from our detections that go into the intelligent security graph. So if you went to Joy Chick's keynote last night on M365 with Rob Leffert, she made a strong statement, which is identity is the center of security. Identity is where you make the decision of, in this zero trust network, of if you're going to allow the user in to authenticate and issue tokens, right? So identity is the key in these zero trust networks. And so we have a set of products across that offer protection in the identity space. So Azure Active Directory has a number of features for protection and security. Specifically, we're going to talk about identity protection. And then there's Azure Advanced Threat Protection. Azure ATP is the acronym or common name. And then Microsoft Cloud App Security, or MCAS, what you'll hear.
So if we're looking again at the example that we gave before about this real customer that was breached, we can see that throughout the attack kill chain, there are several things that the attacker are looking for. Number one, the attacker looks to understand how can I compromise the identity. And this can happen many times via phishing, via luring the user to click on a bad URL, or via compromised credentials such as password spray or breach replay attack, exactly as the one that we've seen before. Once we are inside on compromising the identity, we can actually look either using this compromised identity to connect to cloud applications, whether manipulate them, change the behavior while getting data from there, or actually finding our way inside the business and start moving laterally until we get to the crown jewels, the domain dominance, wherever we can do whatever we want to do inside the business in terms of privileges. When we are looking at those 3 solutions that Diana was mentioning, we can see that the Azure AD identity protection is helping us to look at all of the login and sign-in activities to cloud applications, understanding what is the right behavioral for the right user, and from that looking at users that could have been compromised. When we are looking at using the application itself, the Microsoft Cloud App Security is looking at the application session and understanding what is the user doing inside the session, whether we are changing something on the application, whether we are accessing too much data, or downloading too much data or changing our files. When we are looking at the on-premise environment, Azure ATP comes to help by profiling the user activity within the on-prem environments. How I'm logging into my computers, to other servers. I'm doing remote desktops, whether I'm trying to do some reconnaissance and building a map of the network. And together, we can see that Azure AD, ATP, Azure ATP, Azure AD Identity Protection, and Microsoft Cloud of Security provide us an umbrella of understanding what is the user activity and really fight against attack, as we've seen, that is crossing dimension for the hybrid organization. So Dana, let's see how Azure AD Identity Protection looks.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned that in this world of hybrid cloud and zero trust networks, that identity is really the new perimeter. You no longer can rely on your firewall and your internal infrastructure to protect your organization. So I want to concentrate, the first thing is we're going to talk about Azure Active Directory protection and specifically identity protection. So identity protection uses cloud intelligence and machine learning. It gives you a consolidated view of threats that it detects in your identity systems. It recommends remediations that you can take, for instance, reset the user password or block the login. And it does, using machine language and the intelligence that it has, it calculates both a user risk and a session risk. Now, when I talk about risk, for identity protection, it's the user's risk of compromise or a session as it happens. What is the risk that this session is from a attempt of a compromise, right? So if you ask what is risk of, it's risk of compromise. So identity protection does those calculations on every authentication. And then we use conditional access, specifically risk-based conditional access, to automatically protect the suspicious logins or to remediate a compromised account, an account that's already, that we've determined is compromised. Now, identity protection looks for brute force attacks. It looks for infected devices. It looks for elite credentials. It looks for suspicious sign-in activities. I mentioned conditional access. The important thing, how many people here are using conditional access? Oh, good portion of you. So when you use conditional access, and I'll explain what it is in just a minute, but when you look at the risk part of conditional access, that's identity protection. And I noticed Alex Weiner did a talk on zero trust networks a couple hours ago. My slide, I say we process 10 terabytes of data. We really process 40 terabytes of data now when we look to risk during authentications. So what risk-based conditional access allows you to do is maximize your security of your identity system, but also maximize productivity by not interrupting users unnecessarily. So the way conditional access works is you set, it's policies that you create that are evaluated as an authentication happens. So you say, if your conditions could be if it's a specific user, a set of users, if they're coming from specific devices, from specific locations, trying to access certain applications. And then, so those are the conditions that you look for. And then there's controls that if it matches what you set out, the controls take care of what you intend to do. So you can allow access, you can limit access, you can require MFA, you can force password reset, or you can deny access. Just some examples, there's more than that. You use third-party MFA, for instance. You can pop up a TOU. And then all that happens before you get access, you allow access to your on-prem or your web app. So it's a lot. So let me give you an example of what CA can do, a typical CA policy. So you could say, if the login is coming from a non-compliant device and the location is outside my corporate IP range, and the risk of that session is determined to be medium and high, challenge for multi-factor authentication, right? So that's an example of conditional access policy that leverages risk calculation. So what do we, in the last day or so, we announced a new version of identity protection, which is currently in private preview. And I'm going to give you a sneak peek at it here. The new version of identity protection has an expanded risk view for quicker analysis of both your user risk and your session risk. Something that we took a lot of customer feedback. One of the things they wanted is to understand a user's risk of what happened to them over time. In the current identity protection, you can only see a user's current risk. You can't see what happened or the trend in the past. We added enhanced machine learning for both user and session risk. So, another rev of the crank on our machine learning, and so it provides greater security. And then we took a lot of user feedback on the usability, and so we support bulk actions now, which is a big request from our customers. Filtering, sorting, smart downloads, and that's just a fraction of what we have in the new identity protection. So let's go and look at it. So this is the new version of identity protection that you can see here. That's currently in private preview. And we have an overview of the user risk here. And then over on the side, we give you kind of at a glance the things that you should be worried about. So the number of high-risk users that you should go and think about or investigate, and the number of medium-risk users. Also, the number of sign-ins that were unprotected. And then also, we show your identity secure score, which was announced this week. I'm not going to go into details about it. There's some other sessions about secure score. But identity secure score basically tells you configurations, changes you can do in your environment to improve your security posture and see how you're doing against other companies in your security posture. So that's secure score, and we surface it right in the new identity protection. These are the users at risk, and this is the trend of users that are at risk for compromise. So if I click in here, I can see on the 24th, 2 users went to high risk. If I click in, I can now see a view of those users that are at risk. I can also have some advanced filtering here. If I click on the user, this user, Jeff Leatherman, the tray comes up, and now I can see detailed information about this user. I can see the user info. I can see past risky sign-ins that might have contributed to the risk. I can see offline risk events that might have happened. In this case, Jeff had a leak credentials event, so his credentials were matched out on the web. It was found out on the dark web from a third-party breach.
Just remember this name, Jeff Leatherman, because we'll hear about this name a bit more later on this session. And going back to the example, this is the non-MFA, non-sensitive user for which his credentials were stolen. So keep this name in mind.
And then we can also see the user risk history. So here, if the user was high risk and then they reset their password, you would see the transitions in risk level here. I also have this other user guy here, Dana Kaufman. It looks like he's doing some not smart stuff. He has some login failures that are coming from around the world, kind of medium risk. So we'll go and check him out in a minute. Going back to the overview, we also give recommendations of what to do. So if you have these risk policies, these risky users, you can configure risk policies to automatically remediate this user. And this is conditional access working with identity protection. So I'm going to click on here and show you a risk policy. So I'm setting my conditions. First, I pick the groups or the users I want to apply this policy. In this case, I only have one user, but I can include or exclude different users. I can set what conditions I want. In this case, what risk level I want this policy to trigger on. It's set for high, but I can choose low, medium, or high. And then the condition or what I want to do if the login of this user matches. So I can block access. So if the user goes to high risk, when they log in, access will be blocked. They'll call help desk. Help desk will then help them change their password. That's one option. Or I can use self-service password reset and require a password change, which is what we recommend to allow users to automatically remediate themselves, get help desk out of the loop. So when we require password reset, it's not just the normal password reset. We require MFA before it to make sure it's not the bad guy, that it's the good person trying to get in their account. So I'm going to go back to the overview. We also show risky sign-ins. So these are, as authentications happen, how risky. So we go in here and we have, this is something a lot of customers ask, advanced filtering. Kind of looks like the Azure AD sign-in logs, right? But now we have MFA status in here. We have conditional access policies that were applied. We have the different risk levels that happen. We can filter on risk types. We can filter on the country. You can search for a specific IP. I'm going to click on this user. You can also bulk select and bulk dismiss, which is something our customers had asked for. I'm just going to click on this risk event, and hey, it happens to be me. I can look at the device I logged in from. I can look at why it thought I was risky, the MFA and conditional access policies that were applied, and then these are some important options up here. I can confirm this login is safe, which means, hey, this really was a good login from this user. So you can say it as an admin. This will feed into our detection technology and make the detections better. Another thing we allow you to do is, the admin, is to confirm compromise. If you confirm compromise, the user automatically goes to high risk. If you have a user risk policy set up, you don't have to do anything else. The next time the user logs in, they'll be asked to MFA challenge and then reset their password. You've addressed that, and then their risk level will go down after that. So something new is we allow admins to tell us when a user is compromised. We might detect something as medium, and you can tell us, no, this is an actual compromise. It'll go to high. We'll learn from that as well. So new feature there that our customers are really excited about. And we, as data scientists and geeks, we are excited about that as well, getting other people to label our data. And then the last thing is we were talking about sign-in policies. So this is the conditional access sign-in policy. And so I have one user selected, which is this guy that keeps logging in from different places that are risky. I set the policy medium and high. Right? So if a login comes in and the risk in that specific session is medium or high, I want to require multi-factor auth in this case. We can block or do other things, but we're going to require multi-factor auth, and the policy is enforced. So now, real quick, I'm going to switch over, and here I am, and I'm a bad guy trying to log in. In this case, I think I'm in the Netherlands, so this is all Dutch, although I can't read Dutch. And this is attempting to log into Office 365. So what we expect to see, let's take a second as we go across the country, across the world and back again. Is what we expect to see is, as a bad guy logging in, we expect to see the user risk policy to trigger. So sign in. And boom, it says so identity protection detected suspicious activity. If I'm the bad guy, I hit verify and try to get in. Hey, I don't have the authenticator app. I can't verify this permission, so I can't get into this session. So that's a quick view of identity protection, the new version of identity protection. There's a whole session tomorrow at noon, I'll show at the end, that you can learn even more of the features that are in identity protection.
Thanks, Dana. So we can see that identity protection is giving us the ability to stop the attacker at the gate when they are coming and try to attack our organizations from the cloud. If we are trying to look at Azure ATP, and who's familiar here with Azure ATP in the room? Oh, it's a very, very nice amount of people for a product that is 6 months old. Thank you. If we're looking at Azure ATP provides us the ability to look at organizations where they've been attacked on the on-prem side, whether somebody jumped from the cloud to on-prem or started on-prem, by analyzing the behavior of the users, and actually by that helping us to identify, but not only identify, but also investigate advanced threats that are coming at our door. So if we're looking at Azure ATP, and again, going back to the attack kill chain, take a look at those kill chain that attackers are trying to do in order to gain domain dominance of our business. Try with reconnaissance. The moment me, as an attacker, get into your on-prem premises, I would like first to build a map of your organization. I would like to understand what are the usernames, and what groups they belong to, and who is privileged and who is not, and what IP address have you connected from recently, and maybe what are the servers, and what IP addresses do you have in the network, and how they connect to. And now when I build this map, what we are calling reconnaissance, now I can actually start compromising other accounts, maybe through brute forcing them via on-premise protocols, such as LDAP, Kerberos, and others. And then I can start moving laterally. What do I mean by moving laterally? Let's say that I'm an administrator running on a specific computer, and Dana, you've logged in on this computer itself. I can use malicious methods in order to actually steal Dana's credentials and actually use them from another computer. And we're going to see how Azure ATP is actually bring that. So we're moving laterally, and we're finding another user that maybe is not sensitive, and another one, until we're lucky, and bingo, and we're getting into a privileged user, and from there to getting domain dominance, the way is easy. So we can see here Azure ATP helping us to find the way where the attacker is trying to build a map, or compromising credentials, or moving laterally, or actually having a full domain dominance. And what I would like to do now is to take a few moments in order to dive into Azure ATP a bit more and to see how it looks like. For the people who really want a 1 hour, 15 minutes deep dive session, you're more than invited to visit us tomorrow, 15 minutes past 2, to see a bit more about Azure ATP. So let me sign in into my Azure ATP environment. And when you're signing in to Azure ATP, you're actually getting into the queue of the alerts that Azure ATP would like to provide you, the security operations or the incident response people at the organization, to understand what attacks are getting into my business and how we can deal with them. We've been working pretty much hard in order to make sure that we are minimizing the number of false positives and showing you only what's important for you. And when we will take a look at the attack, we will see that not only we're showing what's important for you, but we're trying also to show you the evidence, to explain exactly what happens, and what additional steps we can take more than that. So if I'm looking here at the top part of the screen, we can see here several alerts that related to domain dominance. These are obviously the latest alerts that we have seen in this specific attack. And if I will just open one of them, over here, so opening one of them is giving us the ability to exactly understand what happened. In this scenario, we're talking about a relatively new protection that we gave as a response to some exploit that was provided earlier this year to this is shadow attack, where we're actually seeing a benign computer that's trying to pretend as a domain controller. So what we can see here in a very, very simple way is that we can see what are the entities that were involved, but more than that, we can actually see the evidence and understanding what happened. So we actually declared that as an alert because we've seen a computer which is not a Windows server trying to do a domain promote, trying to pretend as a domain controller, and immediately, just a couple of seconds later, to actually downgrade itself. And this is actually the evidence that are helping us to understand that this is an alert. So we'll go a bit further down. As we said, we are going to have some more time on that tomorrow. And if you remember, there was this user, Jeff Leatherman, right?
Yes.
You saw Jeff Leatherman before that with compromised credentials. And I can see something interesting here. I can see that Azure ATP has identified for the same user, Jeff Leatherman, a suspicious VPN activity. And if we'll be clicking at that, we'll see that again, from the evidence perspective, Jeff is considered to do a suspicious VPN activity because this is not the computer, not the kind of source country that Jeff is usually connecting from. We can continue to investigate that by actually clicking at Jeff and looking at more information about Jeff. Now, we said that the attackers are trying to move laterally within the network in order to try to compromise more and more users and get to the sensitive accounts. A very, very good security feature that we are providing in Azure ATP is the lateral movement path that is actually giving us the ability to see potential abilities for the attacker who compromised Jeff to jump to other people, such as, for example, from Jeff to Ron, and guess what? From Ron to Nick, which is an admin accounts. So all of that and many more are providing us ability with Azure ATP to really understand what's going on at the network and actually to understand advanced attacks and investigate them. So we talked about Azure ATP, we talked about Azure AD. We also have the Microsoft Cloud App Security. We're not going to drill down into Cloud App Security in this session, and feel free to take a Cloud App Security session, but we understand that Cloud App Security is actually controlling the session itself. So just 2 examples. If I'm a user who is working with a cloud application and trying to download too much data from this application, this is providing me the ability to understand that whoever a malicious insider or a person tried to do data exfiltration. Or more than that, if I gave access to a rogue application to my email who's trying to manipulate that and maybe add forwarding rules, Cloud App Security will help me understand that. And with that, we're getting more understanding.
So what we showed so far and what we have today is Azure ATP, which allows you to investigate on-prem identity behaviors and attacks. You have MCAS, which allows you to look at cloud workloads and attacks that happen in session and investigate those. And Azure AD Identity Protection, which looks at risky sign-ins and user risk as authentications happen through both on-prem ADFS or federated and into the cloud. And so I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. Bad guys don't know that SecOps and admins have to go to 3 different consoles to see this. Right? All they know is they compromise an account and then they go and do malicious things. So Al, what can we do to make this better for our SecOps?
So actually, this is something that we've identified and we do understand. From reality point of view, the bad guys actually cross from the cloud to the on-prem. And the fact that we are having today and providing you 3 different solutions that are helping to give you an umbrella doesn't give you one view today to actually understand that. And we would like to make our life easier and your life more secure. We would like to make your SecOps people more effective and to understand better what happens in your organization. And for that, we're announcing today something that we've been working very, very hard, our group, of all of these 3 solutions and a bit more, to provide you a single context for the identity. So think about that. We don't have 3 identities for Dana. There is only one Dana. One Dana in the cloud, one Dana in the sessions, one Dana on the on-premise, and the same for Eyal and the same for every one of us. And we are working very hard in order to providing you a preview that will come up relatively soon, that will give you the ability to first gain one pane of glass that explains us to understand what the user is doing. So if the user is doing any activities in the cloud or on-prem or wherever, we'll be able to see that. If there are any behavioral of the user between the cloud and on-prem that considered to be suspicious, we'll provide you this information. We'll provide some new detections and for that. We're going also to do more than that. We're thinking about you, security operations people or incident response people that are going through the alert queue and understanding that there are many users that could be considered compromised. We understand that not all compromised users were born equal. Some compromised users may do greater damage to the business because they are accessing more sensitive data, or maybe because there are more executives, or maybe because they are doing more impact on the business. And it's important for us to give you something that we call investigation priority to actually understand what identity I need to deal with today. And for that, if we're doing a demo for that, we would like to introduce you this new concept coming from Azure ATP, from Microsoft Cloud App Security, from Azure AD Identity Protection, that is actually looking at the identity in the center. So let's see what are we having here. Again, Jeff, our hero for today. Let's see what Jeff's doing and what we can see in this console. So here's Jeff. We can see a lot of information on the directory data for Jeff. We're going to get back to this pane in a moment. We can see several more elements here. So we can see the investigation priority of Jeff. And I can see that right now, Jeff's priority is higher than 93% of other users. So maybe we can see here that Jeff's risk score is high, But I would like to investigate Jeff right now more than other people who are high, because that maybe has a lateral movement path to a sensitive account, or because maybe Jeff is accessing highly confidential data. So let's take a look at more information. We can see the devices and resources and just added cloud accounts and locations from the cloud on-prem that Jeff is connecting from. But maybe the crown jewels from this console is that we can see all of the alerts that are affiliated to Jeff. So let's take a look, and maybe now we can tell Dana the full story of what happened at this customer that we've been investigating 45 minutes ago.
Where did that leaked credential event come from?
So leaked credentials event was coming from Azure AD identity protection.
Wow.
And also the second one, the risky sign-in, unfamiliar sign-in properties was actually coming, and we can actually click on that and open this page in order to understand more what happened, what we can do with that, what are the evidence. And if we'll be looking a bit more, suspicious inbox forwarding was coming on this identity from Microsoft Cloud App Security. There is another very interesting alert. We are not going to get to that today, abnormal access to protected data, a cooperation that our team is doing with Azure Information Protection to see suspicious activity on highly confidential information that was labeled classified or protected by AIP. And then we can see here several alerts that were coming from Azure ATP, who is monitoring the on-prem suspicious VPN and recon. So we can understand all of that, but not just that. I can actually go here to the risk score and click on that.
Where did that come from? Where did the user risk come from?
The user risk score, this is exactly what I'm clicking, and it's coming from Azure AD Identity Protection, of course.
Wow, direct.
And a click on that will actually bring us right on the spot, back to Jeff Leatherman, where we can actually see more information from Azure ATP, whether we can make it actionable and reset the password, and by that remediate the entire incident and understand we're secure. Alternatively, we could start from here, and if we started from here, we're having the investigate more with Azure ATP, and we would have landed exactly in the right spot in the Azure ATP. So we can see that there is cross-relations between all of our products, and the concept is really to provide you the understanding that there is no just identity at the cloud, identity on the on-prem. From the attacker perspective, an identity equals identity equals identity. And that should be exactly the same.
All right, how cool was that? You guys are the first people to see it live. The full experience.
It is really cool. We are working so hard to make that available for you really, really, really soon. And if we're talking about you, so we talked a lot about the present. We're talking a bit about the future. And Dana, there are so many IT pros here in the room. What would you recommend me to do on Monday morning when I get back at the office in order to get a better security posture at my business?
So right after this session, or when you get in tomorrow, we want to share some guidance that you should go and make sure you do. And we split it in the crawl, walk, run. So immediately, we want you to protect your privileged users and primary environments. So you should make sure you enable MFA for admin accounts. You saw in some of the sessions, they showed a baseline policy for MFA for admins. Better yet, use PIM so you limit that admin surface area, right? So go and do that. There was a stat that 99% of account compromises could be prevented by MFA. Why would you not have MFA in your admins? You want to go into identity protection and monitor your risk reports. You want to go and I showed you the new identity secure score. Go and look at what your current score is and what you can do to improve your score. You should also go in Azure ATP and protect your primary user domains. All right, so that's crawl. Go do that either after the session or when you get back next week. Walk. Protect all your users and domain controllers. So after you protect the privileged users, go and protect all your users. Block legacy auth, right? We know a lot of badness happens on those protocols. Turn on password hash sync and ban passwords so you can make use of the leak credential checking that we said in the third-party breach intelligence. Protect all your domains and forests using Azure ATP and monitor all your Azure ATP works alerts. Investigate lateral movements and domain dominance alerts. So those alerts are important to look for in Azure ATP. And then once you get all that done, run to really be going and get yourself fully secure, protect all your users and integrate the alerts into your SecOps flow. Enable MFA for your users using, for your end users using sign-in risk and user risk policy that we demonstrated that. Now, this was just a condensed version of the guidance. There's a whole session tomorrow on Thursday called Shut the Door to Cybercrime with Identity-Driven Security. They're going to talk about all those bullet points in detail and more. So make sure you go to that session tomorrow at 10:45. There's a bunch of other sessions going on. There's a couple that were recorded. You see them here. Tomorrow morning, make sure you go to Alex and Yanan's session. They're sitting here in the front row. They're going to go into more depth about what we're doing and what we're working on in the future. And so they have an hour and 15 minutes, a little more time to get into some of these concepts. So make sure you go to that. If you want to learn more about the new identity protection, Rajat's doing a session at 12:30. Is that 12:45? Where he's going to deep dive into all the new features in identity protection. And then I'm giving a talk tomorrow at 3:15 about identity protection and CASB integration, how you really, identity solutions need to be integrated and work with CASB solutions, in this case, MCAS. And then also, I mentioned Zero Trust a couple times, but Alex is doing a mechanics talk on Thursday, so make sure you either go see it or watch the recording of that on Zero Trust Networks. So.
And as we said, there is also an Azure ATP session tomorrow at 12:15, where we'll be able to delve and dive by far more into AT and Azure ATP.
There's a couple more resources we have in the slide deck you can go download. You can send feedback to aatpfeedback@microsoft.com. The link to the comprehensive identity protection with Azure AD and ATP has there's a whole web page full of information, and we're going to put out a blog post, I believe, about the solution as well. So check the resources. With that, we will take questions. We have 3 minutes.
We can, okay. Let's take everybody.
All right, we'll take them offline.
Okay, so we can take the questions offline, and so far, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for visiting us. Enjoy the rest of the day.